We're going to look at building inverse functions. This is an informal technique. There's a more formal technique we'll do later in class. This one's just an intro, and you know, again, it's dealing with simple functions, and we're going to look at kind of, I call it the eyeball test. It involves order of operations, and again, these are for simple functions. Let's start. Remember, x is our input number. We're going to define f of x as 2x minus 3. And suppose that's all you're given is one function and you're asked to find the inverse. On the previous video, we had two functions and we did the composition of f and g, and then we did the composition of g of f. Both of those compositions had to equal x. But suppose, and this is for this video, you've only got one function given and you've got to come up with its inverse. What you do is you take a look at your function that's given. In this case, it's 2x minus 3. For any input number, using order of operations, so suppose I plug a 7 in. The first thing that this function does is multiplies by 2 and then subtracts 3. Over to the side, let's keep a list of that. Multiply by 2, subtract 3. When you invert the steps, you go opposite order and do opposite operations. So first you would do add 3, and then second you would do divide by 2. Building your inverse, you would start with an x, that's your input for the inverse, and then you follow your steps that you've created over here. Take your input number, whatever it is, add 3, and then divide it all by 2. And so f and g are inverses of one another. This next function is defined as x squared minus 3. X is an input number, so whatever number you plug in for x, the first thing you do is you square it and then you subtract 3. Let's come over here and make a note of those steps. First step, square the input, and then you would subtract 3. Inverting your steps, you would add 3 and then square root. Let's write x for our input value. Follow your steps. You would add 3 and then square root. And then finally, our last example, this one involves 3 steps. It's a 3-stepper. Let's suppose all you're given as function f is the cube root of 2x minus 1. Again, let x represent your input. If you were to plug a number in, say 5, 6, or 7, whatever number you want to, the first thing this function does is multiplies by 2. Then you would subtract 1. And then you would take the cube root of whatever the result was. Inverting your steps, you go in opposite order with opposite operations. The opposite of cube root is to cube, or raise to a third power. Then you would go opposite of subtracting 1, that's adding 1, and then opposite of multiplying by 2, that's divide by 2. When you get ready to build your inverse, again, start with an x, that's where your input will go. Cube, that's raise that input to the third power, add 1, and then divide them all, or divide it all by 2. So again, this is an informal way to build an inverse function. If you have some really complicated inverse functions, then there's other techniques that can be used. But for our class in the intro portion at least, we can always use these order of operation steps.